The topic for this session is, why should citizens be defenseless?
Although your species are more technically advanced, your philosophy seems to be what we on this planet called fascist. Perhaps we are more involved socially than your kind. We don't want our citizens to be defenseless, which is why they have the right to vote for their leaders. Although we have a few deviants who break the law, most of us citizens have evolved past the need to carry weapons, or even to have weapons for the purpose of defending themselves, violently, against an assailant. We have special organizations to enforce the law, and we have courts to settle disputes.
We have scanned and studied all the technology on this planet, and we see none that can detect bad will by so-called deviants against another citizen, and then stop the deviant from carrying out their intended assault. Are you saying such technology exists?
No, we don't, but we hope to get there one day, perhaps with your help. We have law enforcement agencies that hunt down these deviants, whom we commonly call criminals, and they are then judged by their peers as to what their fate shall be. This process is difficult as it is without citizens having the means to use so-called defense weapons on each other in marital or other personal disputes. The weapons, alone, in households, are often discovered and used by children with horrible results. We don't want citizens to be defenseless, we just don't want them have any weapons for defense.
If your species was going to be judge on the argument of the last speaker, you likely be given a domestication evaluation. There was no higher level intellect shown with the last speaker's response. If you can't stop criminals from committing crimes, then at best you can catch them after the crime has been committed. If the non-criminals can't defend themselves, then that would create a breeding ground for more and more people to try the criminal way, and for criminals to continue to commit crimes, until caught, if ever. More troubling is how readily your non-criminals accept laws that take away their ability to defend themselves. Creating a defenseless public via laws and procedures makes a flame of potential victims, and predatory criminals are the moths. This evaluation requires no processing time to reject or accept.
We aren't against citizens defending themselves, we just want to make sure that firearms are used for sport, hunting, and limited defensive use. There is no reason for the public to have high-powered semi-automatic weapons with large-capacity magazines. These types of weapons are used by the military and law enforcement, and have no place in the home.
I checked the history of guns used by law enforcement in this country, and the results show that law enforcement has moved from revolvers to semi-automatics, and larger magazines for their semi-automatics, both in rifle and pistol form. Why do you think they have done this?
They have done this because the criminals they confront are often using those types of weapons. We don't want to have our officers risking their lives fighting against criminals that have superior weapons. Law enforcement officers are the citizens' line of defense from criminals. Generally speaking, citizens should leave their defense in the hands of these professionals.
The second speaker also sounds like a species with a tiny brain. Law enforcement officers can only apprehend law violators, not protect citizens. Why should measures be enacted to protect law enforcement officers and exclude citizens? If criminals are using powerful weapons, why wouldn't the citizens be allowed to have said weapons also? Citizens haven't signed up to risk their lives apprehending criminals, so at the very least they should get as much concern about their safety as law enforcement officers.
Your so-called ordinary citizens are buying assault weapons and then going out and randomly slaughtering other so-called ordinary citizens. Thousands of children are killed each year by firearms. We need stronger laws to make owning a gun more difficult.
That was a bunch of disjointed babbling of facts, or assertions, that at their best affirm why citizens should be allowed to defend themselves. Citizens need firearms to protect themselves from random crazed shooters. They need to have firearms to protect themselves from criminals using firearms. Since your society calls anyone under the age of 18 a child, then the fact that a large portion of murders and shootings in your society are committed by these so-called children puts the children being killed by firearms statistic in a different light. The main point is, nothing the last speaker said has anything to do with the justification of restricting or eliminating your citizens' rights and needs to defend themselves. A criminal by definition is someone who breaks the law, so they will use whatever means they choose to commit crimes regardless of whether it is legal or not. Crazed shooters seem to be mentally disturbed and are often prepared to take their own lives when confronted. What law will stop them? Your so-called children get firearms from unlawful sources. You have extremely strong laws against the manufacture, distribution, sale, and use of various chemicals. Yet the epidemic of illegal drug use and related carnage and death continues to grow. It would seem that your society has a twofold problem. The first is an ineffective law enforcement and judicial system. The second is something systemic in your society as a whole that creates so many criminals.
This country, for approximately the first 100 years of its existence, was an oppressive nation to a conquered and enslaved people. The enslaved aspect of the oppression was stopped at the beginning of the second 100 years. Oppressive laws and unofficial oppressive behavior towards the former slaves continued for the second 100 year. At the beginning of our current 100-year cycle, so-called liberal elements in our society promoted and supported the casting off of all legal oppressive laws and gave the former slaves the same rights and privileges as the majority. This was a high point in our country's history. What followed was the baby was thrown out with the bathwater. The liberal element, pushed by its most extreme elements, became emboldened to tear down all vestiges of the old order, including the Constitution and accompanying amendments, for which are pillars of our country's rise and greatness. The wishes of the majority were made subservient to the wishes and privileges of the minority, some of which were bizarre. Power corrupts, and the liberal left is now trying to stay in power by crushing the First and Second Amendment, for starters. The liberal left uses firearms control as a smokescreen to their real objective. They not only want the citizens of this country to be defenseless, they want them to abandon the sense that they should defend themselves. They want a nation of peasant sheep, where the government knows best and decides every aspect of their lives. This can be seen by how they handle less lethal means of self-defense. Such things as pepper sprays, tasers, pepper ball and kinetic launchers, stun batons, etc., are banned in part or in whole in many of the large and medium-sized cities in this country. The brilliance of the Founding Fathers to know that governments can, and often do become tyrannical, and that citizens have the right to oppose such a government. Thus our Second Amendment. The United Kingdom has a history of peasantry submitting to their betters. The government has taken away all weapons for self-defense, which might soon include knives of a certain blade length. We are not a nation of peasants. We choose to have a government that represents us, not govern us.
I am giving the last speaker 50 points for two reasons. The first reason is it seems like there aren't enough rational thinkers in this governing assembly to ever get you to 1,000 points in the time I am willing to stay here. Secondly, compared to a lot of the illogical or diabolical babble I have heard from this group, it was the first time your members came off as truly being of higher intelligence. Let's hope this is a trend, for your sake.
I think women are major advocates for gun control, and to be honest, banning firearms entirely. It is born out of the desire to live in a safe environment for ourselves and offspring, for those of us who have them. What we have failed to realize, however, is firearms are a great equalizer in the one area where we fall behind men, and that is in the area of physical confrontation. There are a few badass women among us, and it's fun to see women portrayed in the media kicking the butts of big burly men. This, however, is fantasy. Women need firearms to truly protect themselves.
We end on a good note. 10 points. The good news is you have shown enough higher level thinking, such that you being recommended as food stock is off the table. The bad news is there is a lot of points yet to be acquired before you will be seen as better than pets.